Give everyone another minute or so.
Is someone recording this? I see Russell here.
Yeah, there's Russell's note taker.
Okay, just want to make sure.
All right. Yeah, and it's about time, so let's get started. Does anyone want to go through the Java highlights, or do you want me to? Any volunteers? All right. Okay. So I'll quickly go through the Java highlights, but I will be handing this off more, I think. So last week. So first of all, thanks to Drew for adding a PR that prevents empty puffin file creation when we write out DVs. So always good to suppress creating objects that are actually empty. Looks like a good PR on basically that oversight. So thanks, Drew, for that. The next one is actually a kind of a funny bug where we limited previously the number of columns we'll collect metrics on. Excuse me, columns we will collect metrics on by default to 100 columns. The problem was that if we had nested columns, all the nested columns would be collected. So we would basically blow out stats collection and put a ton of metrics into manifests. So thanks to Josh from Toast for fixing this. It basically recursively applies the limit, taking first the top level fields and then the fields from the next layer down and so on to get the set of IDs that we're going to collect stats for. So basically it makes the guarantee an actual guarantee that you'll only collect stats on a certain number of columns and does a good job of being selective about which columns to get stats for. So that's really nice. And awesome that was, Josh got it done quickly so that it can go into the 1.10. Next, thank you to Marcus for fixing some concurrency issues in Azure Credential Refresh. Really nice to have that fixed. And also thanks to Iowa for implementing variant read support and unshredded write support in Spark V4. So Spark V4 adds a variant type to Spark. This adds read support that can handle both shredded and unshredded data and will write variants as unshredded. One thing that we really would love people to start looking at is how can we write shredded variants by default. So coming up with a heuristic for how to determine the shredding schema and getting an implementation out would be really cool if anyone wants to pick that up. Next, I want to mention the fix that went in for nanosecond expressions. So there was a bug in expression binding where we would take a numeric long value that was in nanoseconds and then create a new literal out of it and then cast that literal to timestamp nanos, which ended up converting to nanos twice. So that was fixed, and we also added a couple of methods to be able to create literals out of longs that allow you to embed the unit. So you can say micros of some long value or millis of some long value, and it will create the correct literal in microseconds or nanoseconds, depending on what you use. Then there are a bunch of docs updates. So, thank you for adding the meetup guidelines to Danica. There are, Kevin has done quite a bit, I think. I don't know who added the V3 types to Spark and Flink conversion, but Kevin, thank you for reorganizing navigation, adding a subpage for the REST catalog under spec and things like that. I know I always like try to go find the REST spec and end up going directly to YAML and like pasting it between websites. So
Yep, it's like 10 clicks to get to like a line.
yeah, so thank you
Yeah.
for taking care of that. And then lastly, I want to go and thank Amog for fixing incremental cleanup when we have snapshot expiration. So what was happening was we had a heuristic for when to use incremental cleanup versus not, and that wasn't a very good one. And so we actually went back and forth, on several rounds of reviews trying to get the right rule to determine when you can use incremental cleanup. And I think the algorithm that we have now is a whole lot better. So thanks, Amog, for spearheading that and getting it done. All right, and I will hand it off for someone to do PyIceberg. Who wants to talk about PyIceberg highlights? Fokko?
I can do it. Yeah, of course.
Right.
So yeah, we got like a lot of fixes in. We're heading up to the 0.10 release, so it's very exciting. So first of all, we had like an issue when you import like an existing partitioned Hive table, where the partition field is not part of the data file. Yeah, if you filter on that, you will get like big errors. So that's been fixed by Roman. Thanks for working on that. We have support of reading nanosecond times in PyArrow. Thanks, Alex, for working on that. We removed the upper bound constraint on the PyArrow dependency. So PyArrow, yeah, they only pump like their major version, so it's very hard to lock on that. And it was also like limiting users that wanted to use like the latest greatest of Arrow. So yeah, we removed that. I think that's a great decision. We moved the snapshot expiration under the table.maintenance.expire snapshots API. So very cool to see like all the maintenance functions also coming into PyIceberg. So yeah, very happy to see this, and hopefully we'll see more in the future. And we got added support for the custom auth manager. So we're actually also copying like the whole concept of the auth manager that we have in Iceberg also to PyIceberg. I think that's it for PyIceberg. Shall I continue, or any other volunteers who want to go through the other updates? Yeah.
Keep it rolling.
Sorry. For Go, we have like the strict metrics evaluator, which is really important for making the next step of evaluating what to include and not to include in your queries. So thanks, Leon, for working on that. We have added support for the name mapping. Thanks, Blue, for that. And we also have like a refresh method. So we also see like, these things coming into the Go library. There was a bug with the snapshot reference. So it would only update like the branch if it was on main. So that was discovered and fixed by Tobias. Thanks for working on that. And Leon actually worked on the Iceberg Spark integration tests, which I always love. It always allows me to create like these weird edge cases that uncover like all these bugs. And there was a bug in the highest field ID that's been fixed by Alex. So thanks for working on that. For Rust, we also have a couple of new updates. We now infer like the file schema rather first from the metadata location and then on the warehouse path. And we also do that in other implementations. So yeah, we also corrected this into the Iceberg Rust, which had some issues with S3. There was several fixes for the data fusion write support. So it's very exciting to see that happening. Thanks, Sean, for really being on top of that. Added the REST catalog loader and a catalog builder. So these are the primitives to create like the catalogs. I think that's actually not correct. I think that was Renji who was working on that, or Leon. Curtis worked on and I see him also here on the call. Thank you for that. Like working on reading like V1 tables and converting them into V2 in memory. So thanks for fixing that. I think that makes consolidating the metadata much easier. And Gabriel actually worked on the register table implementation. So thanks for adding that. And also in the Super Plus, there's like new stuff being worked on. So both on the read and the write path, there's some activity to read and write Parquet. Thanks Dongshao for working on the write path there. And thanks Gang for working on the schema projection to Parquet, where we actually only take the schemas that we need. And after quite some time, we actually got like the literal transform in there. So thanks Young Wang for sticking with all the reviews and pushing this over the finish line. I think that's for the highlights.
All right, thank you. Next up, let's talk through releases. So starting off with the Java 1.10 release, I have a couple updates and then I'll hand it over to Stephen. So the first update is I brought up last time the Spark V4 DataFrame behavior change. And after talking it through with Anton for a long time and not producing a PR, we don't think that we actually need to introduce a behavior change. So we think that we will want to change the way that it happens. So like not having the refresh eagerly in the Spark table, but actually going and having a rule that handles when to refresh your Spark table. But it should have the exact same behavior as the current version and still give us the benefit of ensuring that all versions, when you do a self-join on a table, are consistent. So we will add that, but it doesn't need to block the release. So this is no longer a blocker. Thank you guys for waiting on us to determine whether we wanted to change behavior there, because that was a good opportunity. And then with the unknown type support, thank you for Fokko. Thank you to Fokko for implementing it. I started a review, but only got halfway through last night, and we'll get that reviewed as quick as possible. So I'll hand it off to you, Stephen, for the rest of the.
Yeah, I think there's no other blockers or remaining PRs for the milestone. So I think it looks like we need to wait for the unknown type support, and we can try to speed up the review and PR process. Yeah, that's the only thing left, it looks like. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And PyIceberg 0.10. Who's the release manager for that?
I can talk about that. I've been kind of chasing down all these bugs. Every time I look at it, it seems like the milestone gets longer and longer. But it's good because we're grabbing all of the bugs that are found and trying to make sure that we're releasing with all of the known bugs. But yeah, we have most of the bug fixes in. We got a few more. I keep on saying, I want to release this week, but that never happens. So hopefully, now that Fokko's back, we're kind of going through some of these PRs, getting them reviewed. But this week, next week, I want to make sure that we get a release out. And then I think for the next release, I want to set a specific date for that, so that, because whatever happens is we say, hey, we're going to do a release, and then everyone's like, hey, can I get this PR in? And then there's a long tail of that. So setting the expectation for the next release to say, I don't know, like October, end of October or something, beginning of November, gives everyone time to get it in. But I'm super excited for this. It's been months since we did a last release, and there's been so many different features in it. So writing the release note will be hard, but it's super exciting.
So I think that's what we do basically for the Java release, is we try to target just every 3 months and get it out. So that's probably a healthy thing to start doing on the PyIceberg side. It's pretty awesome that PyIceberg is at that point where you need a regular release cadence. So
yeah,
you guys.
Yeah, I think it's maturity, right? Like now we're getting to a point where we have enough people, we have enough features that we kind of need to set the cadence.
Yeah.
So after this one, we'll set the next release cadence.
Cool. That sounds great. Then moving on to agenda items. No one actually put in agenda items today. So I went through some of the older ones and guessed. So if there's silence, we'll just have a little bit of awkward silence on some of these and then move on. But the big one, I think, is the file format API that I think we want to, make sure is moving forward and, target for the next one. So Thank you, Peter, for doing all of this work to explore this complicated space of how do we plug in object models and formats and get them to the right engines. So do you want to sort of summarize where we're at on that project and those reviews?
Thank you, Ryan. I was very surprised that the file format API is getting there as a constant item in our agenda items. Basically, thanks for your last review. We went through the actual API, and if I understand correctly, we identified a few points where we need to clarify what we expect from the future API. One of them is for the writing data files, equality delete files, and positional delete files. We have writers for these. And behind these writers, there is an appender which does the actual writing. And these appenders are the same, using the same inputs for data writer and equality delete writer. It's usually the object model defines those. But for the positional delete writer, we have the positional delete of this type. So we need to provide a way for having both appenders which accept the object for the engine and the delete positional delete for the engine. So that's why I see basically two viable options here. One of them is as it was previously, like in the format model, we have data writer, equality positional delete writer, and positional delete writer which returns the appenders for this. Or we have a single writer, but we need, in this case, we need a converter which converts the actual positional delete record to the object model, which is an equivalent object model which writes out this stuff. I've shown how it would look like. I updated the PR with the changes there. It is shown how it would look like. Basically, this is one additional method in a format model for provide the positional delete converter, which is a transformer. I would like to see your ideas. How do you think which way we should proceed? Anton is asking, why do we need these positional delete writers? I would like to have this API as a working for V3 and V2 tables as well. So in V2 we need the positional delete writers. So that's why I provided this option in this new API as well.
Yeah, I think the issue is that we can't just stop writing deletes to V2 tables. So we still need a way to do this. I think that this makes sense. It's not that difficult for us to provide something that, because the positional deletes that we care about now are just a, file path or a location and a position. So that simplifies this problem. I think we should be able to do, something reasonable. I'll definitely go take a look at the two options that you've put out there. Dan?
The delete writers, is that largely just to maintain that compatibility for V2? Or because one of the things is we actually, I believe, call out in the spec what those formats are. So I'm not sure that we could necessarily say, hey, you introduce a new format and also support it with a V2 spec, or is it mostly just for the compatibility of hey, let's make sure that we have something that can replace all the code paths for the reference?
Yeah, exactly. So this is saying you might get a internal row with a file and position from Spark, and you might get something different from Flink or different from various things. So if we're going to abstract the type of row and the file format you're going to, we need some way of making all of that sort of play nicely together. Okay. Right now we have concrete classes for each, well, actually, I forget what we have.
I think the main distinction that I was trying to make, Ryan, is that like, hey, we're not actually doing this to support new formats with older versions, right? That's not the goal. It's to just have a proper abstraction across everything.
Exactly, yeah.
What I want to do here is just split, change the current internal implementations with the new one. So basically, it is changed everywhere at once. I don't want to keep as different versions working with different ones and keep the old writers and such.
That said, it only is important the V2 portion of it, right? Because for the position deletes in V3, we never passed the internal row or the row representation. So it's different from what we had in the past. So it's just the position and the file name. And V2, you could have passed the row to the position delete writer as well, right?
We could, but do we do that? Do we actually encode?
I'm not aware of any engine that actually does it, luckily. But
yeah, the only reason I'm bringing that up is if there was an opportunity to say, hey, we actually construct a delete API that covers Puffin and the new representation, and we just kind of abandon, carrying through the row because we're not actually writing it. Like, we're not changing the reference implementation. We're not like removing anything. Could we have something that is just, hey, this is how you write a delete, and it is abstracted between Puffin and the older representation?
Yes, I think that you can. So, and that's, I suggested this on the PR, and I think this is what's happening. We're basically saying, since no one actually writes row content with a position delete, let's ignore that and not support it. Is that what you've done, Peter, or are you still trying to?
To be honest, we have tests which are testing that if we are really correctly writing out raw data for positional deletes. So this is an API which we officially provide. So I'm a bit edgy here. The thing is that with the internal row transformer, raw data transformer, we can create a way to really transform this stuff without actually copying the data and whatnot. So it is possible to fix it. So I would be hesitant to remove the support unless there is a broad community approval that, okay, the new API will not support this.
Well, so I think we know that it's not supported in V3 to write out a row with a positional delete, and probably won't be moving forward. I think we also know that although we, considered doing it in V2, I don't think any implementation actually does, right?
It makes sense to reach out in the DAO list maybe before we make that, like to see if anyone is actually using that. But yeah, I think that the use case for that, the way we anticipated, was the CDF. So if you're doing like CDC ingestion, then you would persist the row, and that didn't prove to be like the approach that we want to pursue or the one that we could actually build. So,
and that simplifies this a lot, because then we just need to have a common way of passing or of deconstructing the position record, and that should be something that's fairly easy, I think.
Yep. Yep. So the next step is just sending a letter to the dev list and making sure that everybody is aware of this one, and then we can move forward if there is anybody who raises blockers for this. Okay, thanks for those. One next question, or probably hopefully the last one for the API, last big one for the API, is how we would like to move forward with the new write builder stuff. So currently the Parquet write builder has many more actual methods than we will need for the data file writers, and many of them are deprecated and ready to be removed and not really used. My goal was to get a new write builder API which could replace the current Parquet write builder API, and we can use that one. But during the discussions, Ryan raised the question that if we keep the Parquet Write Builder API as it is, and we just provide the additional API above that, which we create parallelly and keep both of them, then we might simplify our tasks. One very interesting thing here is we can remove the parameter for generic parameter for the write builder itself. So we don't need to expose the actual builder anymore if we don't want to replace the Parquet write builder. And here, my question here is what the community thinks about. Either we create a new implementation, so we will have like a Internet Data Write Builder API, we will have a IO Write Builder API, which is for the data files and delete files, and there will be an independent Parquet Write Builder stuff, which leaves parallelly with these and not replaces the new ones, not replacing this one.
I have more of a question. I guess I didn't follow. What are we getting if we like trying to keep a separate Parquet or like Write Builder API? Like, is it like a compatibility thing, or is it?
So the purpose, the Parquet Avro Write Builders are sort of one of the oldest things in the library. And they are essentially adapters to be able to create Parquet files and work with Parquet files using Iceberg schemas and being able to plug in your object model and things like that. So this is actually what the sort of layer above configures. And I think the question is, should we remove those and deprecate them and then have that layer, just the layer above? Or do we continue to provide a builder that can just create a Parquet file from a Avro schema? I kind of prefer keeping those two layers separate so that we have code for working with Parquet, code for working with Avro, and then we adapt that to the common data position delete and equality delete write builders in the future. But I think it's an open question of whether we need to or want to provide ways of working with Parquet files directly, or if we want to only have things go through this abstraction and the registered data models.
Do those low-level bits, do they provide the file appender? So the Avro org in Parquet is like the builder, what does it return? It's returning the file appender?
So I think what would happen is the Parquet and Avro, those are still classes that are responsible for building write appenders. And then the writer builder API would be, hey, give me a builder for a data file, give me a builder for a delete file, sort of that layer that we have on top. We've duplicated that layer on top in Avro and Parquet and Orc so that you could get an Orc data file writer builder. And so like this consolidates that and allows you to plug in your named data model. So I think it makes sense to definitely consolidate that the next layer above. But the question is, do we still need the lowest layer where we're creating the file appenders themselves?
I think we still need the lowest layer, but we don't want to expose that. We don't want to expose the Parquet for anybody else after this, because we will have the internal data for writing metadata, write builder for writing data and delete files. This is my point, but I don't see the whole community's use cases.
So I know that there are people using the Parquet write builders, and we still support things like using write support directly. And so like these have a long history. I would be a little worried about it, but this is something where a deprecation cycle, you can flush out concerns. The bigger thing though is by trying to combine these layers, you get into like the over parameterization of the writer class, because you're not just trying to return here's something that builds a data file in the format, or a data file writer in the format you're requesting. You need to say, here's something that is a, you know, Parquet write builder, and when you call methods, those return the Parquet write builder for method chaining, and like it kind of overcomplicates, I think, the classes on top. And if we could just have a simple like write builder API that's not parameterized by the type of the builder, it's easier.
I'm definitely agreeing with you this here. Okay, can we move forward with saying that we will decide on later? We aim for separating out those two. So we will have the IO writer builder, which will return a writer builder anyway and won't be parameterized. And we will decide whether we deprecate the Parquet writer builder or not, maybe in a dev list again. We discuss this with the wider community.
That sounds good, to limit ourselves to, let's get the new layer in, and then we can decide whether to remove the Parquet one later. I think that's a good path forward. Thank you.
Okay. I think what would happen with this one?
Oh, that's
say again?
That's being replaced by new stuff.
Okay, so basically we were saying that this is, so this previously was the factory that was on top of the Avro, Parquet, and org builders, and that was returning the data writer, the equality delete writer, the position delete writer, right? And it was parameterized was the type of the record, which could be like the engine representation. And we were saying that it's going to be replaced,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, the API will keep, sorry, the API will kept, but the implementation will be changed to use the new registry stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the builders are still parameterized by the type of record that you're going to pass in. It's just that you end up with you don't need to have the type of builder as well.
So are we saying that the file writer factory interface would stay, but the implementation of it would be more flexible so that you can plug in a different object model, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Object model and extend it to more file formats, I believe.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah.
I agree. Okay.
Peter, one more question. You had that discussion about the intermediate format and do a translation. Are we still considering that option, or that is off the table now?
Okay, that's a good question. We haven't decided on yet. We have an ongoing discussion about this with Ryan. Basically, I'm very happy with the changes that the transformation layer. If we add the translation layer or transformation layer for the input of the input of the writer, then we can remove the differences, like instead of the int, we are able to use bytes, read bytes and write out in a similar way in the writer interface. It simplifies the API quite a bit. It introduces a bit of ugly code which does this translation. I run some tests. It is not extensive yet, so I don't claim that it is really never introduces anything which adds overhead, but it is very promising. Like run some performance tests, and even with the transformation layer, the writing is having the same performance requirement. The thing is, it adds a complicated layer, but it could be hidden. We could write it for internal, or we could write it for raw data, and then everybody could forget about those and use that.
Well, hopefully internal and generics don't actually need any translation. For the broader group, the problem that we're trying to solve is that the writers actually, I think the writers and the readers, right? At least the writers, data is handed in through an internal row as a tiny int or a short int. And so you actually have to call get short or get byte on the Spark row in order to get the value. If you call get int, then it fails. So the question is, do we want to build a write builder that detects this case? Because that's what we're currently doing, is in our object model, we detect this case and inject a writer that's going to call get short to get the thing from the row, and then cast it to an integer and return it back to Parquet, or write it into Parquet. So if possible, we would love to not need to do that sort of type fix-up when we're writing. This to me seems like a pretty heavyweight solution to translate internal row into internal row, just to wrap this thing so that you correctly call get short if it's a short, because you need the type information and you sort of need to fix up the row. I think that this is something that is solvable, and like getting through the actual structure of registration and like the current PR is probably the higher priority thing. We're still discussing the row wrappers or how to handle this case.
If you want to spend a little bit more time on this, I can describe that. Basically, this transformation layer is adding an accessor stuff above the internal row. So basically, what the implementation does is not converting the internal row to another internal row, just providing the accessors to actually access the columns of the internal row with the correct accessor methods. It is exactly the same code which is already done in the currently in the writer, and we just export that outside.
Yeah, so I think we can probably circle back on a couple rounds of review and care of that. I think we'll figure out a good solution for it. Okay. Is there anything else on Format API, or do we want to move on to some of the other topics? Because there's a hard one coming up. I want to throw out as an idea. I know that we've talked a little bit about blog posts on the Iceberg dev list. That was kind of going the opposite direction of where we've ended up in the past, where in the past we've said, the PMC does not curate, or the community doesn't curate content. So we don't really want to be gatekeepers for what can or can't be published through the Iceberg website. I think that there was another push to add blogs to the Iceberg website, and I don't think that is a good idea, because again, in the past we've said we don't want to make determinations about what can or can't be published. And I think it's also a good time to actually consider whether we should go further in the other direction. So I want to bring up the possibility of removing the blogs page entirely from the Iceberg website, because it's really that we can't curate the content on the blogs page either. So we basically allow whoever wants to put anything there to put it there, whether it's a helpful post or a marketing post or whatnot. And I don't think that we still have the same purpose for blog posts that we did when we introduced this. When we started the blogs page, it was legitimately hard, and we wanted to highlight every single blog written about Iceberg. And now it's just impossible to highlight every single blog written about Iceberg. And so, is this serving a purpose that we want? I would actually say, we're kind of at a point where it's really only being used by people who choose to use it and are active, and it's no longer giving you a good view of all of the things that are being written about Iceberg. So we should probably retire it. But you know, it's up for community to decide. So yeah, I wanted to bring it up here. Kevin.
I'm +1 on that. I think it's always been interesting to see like the blogs and talks. I think I'm less concerned now because we moved it kind of instead of top level into the community section, but still I think the contents in there are, you know, I don't know if we want to start like policing and like, you know, figure out what should go in there, what shouldn't go in there. I do want to still talk about having an Iceberg project level blog, but we can have those two conversations as separate conversations. But
is that just an idea where like announcements go through a blog sort of format?
Yeah, like there are things where the project itself would like to announce, to post about, and I think we've been there's a lot of information that, you know, may only be announced on the dev list that I think will be good to be a blog post. And you know, maybe in the beginning we can just keep it as announcements from the project itself instead of, you know, guest posts or like others having to submit and you know, having the PMC figure out like, is this the right thing to put? But I do think there is value, and you can see it from other Apache projects as well. But let's keep those two as separate topics. I think I +1 on removing blogs, and I would even throw talks in the same section. Vendors we can keep. Vendors are important, but the blogs and talks I agree with removing. So let someone else chime in too.
Dan?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I don't necessarily think that we want to like close down any avenue for people to highlight work that they're doing. I mean, part of the community is doing that, you know, sharing what you're building, sharing what you've done with it. There's obviously like a marketing and solicitation element that we want to discourage, but this overlaps a little bit with what we've been seeing in Slack too, which is like announcements has been kind of also used to promote things, whether it's blogs or things that may be kind of like on the edge. And it would be good to figure out a mechanism where either a blog's channel there, where we direct content, where people are trying to promote things that they've written about, that probably gives them a little bit more visibility without necessarily having us be like police, or like inserting those things into channels like announcements that we really do want to reserve for releases, you know, meetups, things that are very relevant to the project and are project focused. So
I think that's a good idea. Like having a way for people to very easily, without like opening a PR and adding a description, just like link to a blog post they wrote. But then it's like opt-in whether you see that content.
And that also can potentially help clean up, because a lot of people now have taken to posting in multiple channels at the same time. Like they'll post in announcements, they'll post in general, and they'll post in dev. And so we're getting a lot of just like an onslaught of content that's coming from different directions. And I think, you know, let's provide a channel, let's push things over into that place, and hopefully the community can help, like, you know, police and usher people into the correct places. So, you know, we aren't just like a deluge of like, you know, both external content, internal content, questions, dev, just everywhere. Steven?
Yeah, I think Max from the Flink community, I think he probably suggested on the official blog for Iceberg, where, for example, he implemented the dynamic sync, right? Merge. He interested in writing a deep dive technical blog on that feature, which is part of the Iceberg project. He's saying maybe at the official blog for Iceberg, then maybe value of have those kind of content. I think for the all kinds of other blogs, it's difficult to gate or curate. But I think he was suggesting the value of that technical kind of deep dive, or even like a release announcement if we want to do some in-depth information about certain features. Yeah, that's it.
I do think that, like, as Kevin mentioned, like the hosting a blog is a separate kind of topic. And the challenge there is, of course, just like, one, we have to curate the content. And the other thing is, like, if it doesn't have enough content, then it becomes kind of its own little dead area. And so I think there's a separate conversation to have about that. I think what we were hoping getting consensus on is actually just like removing the links for the current blogs and talks. We do have an official Apache Iceberg like YouTube channel that I think we link off to in the talk. So I don't know if we just move that to community or do something else, but I'm not sure that we need a explicit list of like those things. Like YouTube can curate that for us.
And that's kind of where sorry, Anton is next, but that's kind of the thought behind removing blogs is like having other services aggregate blogs and you can consume what you want through those services. Sorry, Anton.
No worries. I think I'm along the same lines, and based on what I see Russell posted, so it feels like those blogs, I think Data Fusion comes to mind. It's for the project that are at early stage, like Iceberg was, where like when people didn't know the project, you wanted to attract and have like an easy way to find more information, whoever uses it and whatnot. And where I don't think we're at that stage anymore, and yeah, I think it would be +1 to remove like all of the possible links. But it's probably a good idea to have this like a official blog, which would only be written by the developers for like an announcements or some major features or something like that, where we would be like fully confident in the content and whatnot. So I think this is what Kafka is doing based on what I just went through. This is what they do. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, so it sounds like, to summarize, we're all pretty okay with the idea of getting rid of this like sort of weird collection of links that we've accumulated. We don't need to specifically highlight all the blogs, and we probably couldn't highlight all of the blogs happening, which is a great place to be. I'll raise that on the dev list and say like, hey, maybe we should get rid of this blog section. Then that leaves separately the question of should we have an official blog for release announcements and project developer announcements and things like that. I think that does, as long as we scope it to like a very narrow thing, I think that makes sense. This is for the project to announce and document things. If it's a project tutorial about getting started with the project, PyIceberg, that's great. We don't necessarily want to host third-party content. And if we say this is not third-party content, I think I'm pretty comfortable with that because we're a lot more likely to stay in the like no one objects to this content sort of lane, which I think is important for the project. Okay, I'll raise those on I'll raise at least removing the blogs page on the dev list. Maybe we can move more towards the existing like Iceberg blog posts, move more towards like an official blog area in that separate discussion. Okay, thank you. That's really cool. And talks, yes. All right, S3 bounded reads. So there was a thread that was brought up, I think on the dev list, where someone was hitting, oh no, this was in Slack. Someone was hitting substantial overreading from S3 file IO compared to S3A. And one of the things that fixed it was moving to S3, what is it called? Accelerator. And the idea behind the S3 accelerator thing is just to make smaller requests, smaller bounded requests, rather than unbounded requests to S3, which has some issues with it. So I wanted to bring up this point for discussion for like, how are we thinking about this and are there alternatives? I think the main concern is that moving to something that does a lot of bounded reads could have performance implications if you're not getting the bytes quick enough and you have to wait on those requests. as well as it could have implications on billing because the number of requests spikes compared to what it was. And right now with the unbounded reads, it's essentially free because at least if you're within region, you don't care about overreading. So I think there are some open questions about how to move forward here. Dan?
So I think the one part of this that may have been missed is that there's also a question of, can we make the S3 accelerator library the default in S3 file IO? And S3 file IO right now is a bit of a complicated mess of clients because we have effectively three that are hidden underneath that implementation. There's the synchronous client, there's the asynchronous client, and under asynchronous, there's an option of using S3 accelerator. I think my biggest concern with using that by default is I believe that there are still some gaps in terms of features that are supported across those. And so we've got quite a few S3 configurations that are supported through the S3 file IO properties, and some apply only for the, I think everything applies for the synchronous client, some apply for the async, and even fewer apply for S3 accelerator. And I don't know what that overlap is. So I'm very concerned both exposing that complexity to customers, and then there's the additional question around, what is the trade-off that we're making in terms of performance and cost for number of requests and the behaviors of the S3 accelerator. So, I'm not placing a value judgment on what S3 accelerator does, but at least right now people are opting into that behavior as opposed to what the normal client is using. And in terms of the concern around overreads, we have actually known this is the case, and that's partially because the path that we read Parquet files doesn't understand, or at least for a long time didn't understand, the concept of a bounded read. So you would open a stream, and on the S3 side, the client buffers continue to stream from S3. And so especially if you have small files or you have lots of small reads that you're doing across lots of files, the actual bytes sent from S3 will be larger because you're filling up buffers both in the client and the network buffer and other things like that. So you get some small incremental overread. If you're doing larger reads, that is amortized over it, and it ends up being a very small percentage. So we've largely ignored that, waiting for some sort of bounded read option coming from the Parquet APIs. And as it stands today, those are now in Parquet. I think one of the most recent releases introduced those. So the question is just do we want to address the overread problem? I think we do, because that's just net better. And then the other question is around S3 accelerator, and do we want to make that the default? And I think there's still just kind of an open question about well, what trade-offs are we making there, both in feature completeness and in cost? Kevin?
I think Prashant's next.
Oh, Prashant, sorry. I didn't see the green thing.
Yeah, so I've been following the analytics accelerated thread for a while now, and there are some claims which I'm not able to digest easily. One of the claims is that on a 3 TB run, we read 54% less data when you use analytics accelerator. And they're saying that that claim is purely coming from the range gets, which in my opinion, I asked the configuration of the files used, they were saying 128 MB. And again, to the point, Dan, which you were mentioning, it only shows up, the overreading at this point of time only shows up for small objects in which even the client has a small buffer, network buffers are caching those things. Those should be aggravated only on that particular case. So that's one thing I have been requesting to get more data on. Is it the caching that they're doing that's causing less amount of data read? Because eventually what they do is that from the S3 access log, they compare the final read without the accelerator with the accelerator to see the final result. So other optimizations might be coming in. Going into the same track, I was also interested in when we are making more GET request versus opening a stream and reading the stream till we need it. What is the size of the gets? What should be that? It should be adaptive, it should be constant, or what should be the size of the range gets? And then again, drilling more into the analytics accelerator library, it has more than just the range gets. They are even trying to do prefetching, and we had discussed as a community about prefetching a lot, whether we should do it at the file IO layer, or whether, I mean, even in the row groups prefetching, we can schedule the prefetching of the rows groups as well. So, I mean, this library is trying to do a lot of things at this point of time. Are we open in getting parts of it in or enhancing S3 file IO in one shot, or like directly handing it over to the library might not be like at this point of time the right move, but the problems that they are simplifying are actually a problem that we can actually enhance within our own like implementation as well, because like prefetching is something we have already targeted on. So yeah, that were the additional points that I wanted to bring up and know thoughts more about all of you. Yeah.
I think one of the most obvious things is like get the range-based reads actually pumped through. Like we've had the range-readable interface for a long time. We've had the ability to do this, but we never plumbed it through all the way to the Parquet side. And then I think it's a good point to reevaluate, like, where do we stand at that point? Like, did that absorb most of the benefit, or, you know, I'm still open to having X3 Accelerator as an opt-in, but like right now it's unclear what all of the trade-offs are if you make that the default. And I think we just need a better understanding of that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so I've been talking with the S3 AAL team about this, and their ask is they have a series of PRs and they want to, you know, add them to the project and then eventually make AAL the default for S3 later on. We've been kind of back and forth on. Oh, look, he's here. We've been back and forth on, like, you know, how to get this done, what to do. They wrote up a great post or doc on, you know, some of their findings. My suggestion was like if there's enough interest to talk about this, and it seems like, you know, we've been talking a lot about some of the optimizations and what they're doing. I would suggest to have like a ad hoc sync and schedule it on the dev calendar so that we have a dedicated time to talk about this, to dig into it. I think some of the optimizations are not only for S3, like, you know, we just talked about. We can kind of upstream a lot of that, but if it's a good idea, I can help schedule a time on the dev calendar, and we can have like an hour just to think about this. I also want to talk a little bit about file IO implementations and how we want to make some of the features available. Yeah, there's just a lot of different topics around this I would like to talk about. So I can send a post on the dev list, and we can schedule a time.
+1.
Sounds good.
Time,
Moog, you want to take the last point because we're at time?
Oh, sorry, I forgot I was in the queue. I think Danny actually made the point I wanted to make, which was essentially, I think, yeah, we want to sketch out, I think, a matrix of like what is supported or not in in this accelerator library. And the second thing is like, we know we need to plumb through the range readable like interface. Like, I think my preference is let's see how far we can go with that, and that gives us a lot of indication. So yeah.
All right. We are at time.
Well, hold on. Let's let
Michael.
Michael, I think you're working on this. I think you're on those PRs.
Yeah.
We're out of time. Did you have one comment that you want to make?
Michael for one last one?
Sorry, I thought the meeting was at 6. I must have joined like the last one. So I'm coming in at the end here. I just wanted to say, like, for the matrix of like what's supported and what's not supported, the best way would be like the integration tests. Like we've like labeled the ones like with like skips, like there's functionality like cross-region and stuff doesn't work great with async clients right now. And there's a few that will still be skipped. And I can write those down. Like I can put it on our library maybe, and then but we are also working on like closing those gaps. So the idea is for there to be no matrix essentially.
So we just said that we'll schedule a dedicated sync, like an hour sync ad hoc to discuss this in details. I can work with you, and we can post on the dev list and figure out next steps, so we have more time to talk about this.
Cool, perfect. Thanks so much.
Cool. Thanks, Kevin.
Yep.
All right. Thank
Thanks.
you, everyone. See you next time.